Hey guys. So I got mentioned by Mark over at Book Ramble, or tagged, I suppose I should say, in a tag called "What is it about books?" Right? Why do they hold such power over us? Why do we care about them? And I think the question is more geared towards why do we like physical books? What is it about a book as an object that we find so appealing? Right? Why does it draw us and our attention and our desire? And I found it curious that he tagged me because I am very much. Oh, where's that at? Where did that go? I'm very much a user of an e-reader, which is nowhere to be found currently. I'm sure it's in the other room, but I've almost fully adopted digital reading. I don't really read physical books. Unless I can't get my hands on an ebook version of it, which, to be fair, is a decent number. I mean, I just actually picked up these three. We have Riders to Cibele, or Cibele, by Norman Zollerman, or Zollinger, sorry. I picked up From Where the Sun Now Stands by Will Henry. And I also picked up The Court Martial George Armstrong Custer by Douglas C. Jones. All three of these were Western novels that were obscure enough that I was not able to find an ebook for them. So there you go. I buy the physical edition. But it is not my first choice. Now that I have my e-reader, I think there's some vague sunk cost fallacy where I want to use it more, but also just incredibly convenient to have, in my case, over 2,000 different books on there at one time and still have over half of the memory left because books, text files take up so little space. To be able to carry those with it wherever I go, to have something that weighs 500 grams, it's much more comfortable I can read laying back on my bed, and it doesn't cause my hand to fall asleep because there's a bunch of weight bearing down. It makes huge tomes incredibly manageable. I have the entire Harvard Classics on there, which is a 50-volume series that would take up a 5-foot bookshelf, two different things of it. And I have it all in one file. Sure, it's like 100 megabytes, but still, it's no problem. So it's interesting that he tagged me in this. Not that he necessarily knew my reading habits and how I read, but because it's hard for me to answer, for myself at least, why books hold such a magic over people, because I feel like for me a bit of that spell has been broken. I don't feel that sort of kindredness with books inherently now. I immediately eat my words because I do still have a copy of Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, a book that I've already read, and that I have an ebook for now, but I read it in the physical edition last year and loved it. Can't wait to reread it. I'm going to read some more books before then, but I think this is a book I'll return to every couple years. It's just that sort of lovely adventure tale, but I mean, with deep sorrow and tragedy in it as well. I mean, it covers all those emotional bases, but it is such a engrossing, enriching story, singular adventure. And I read it in this copy. And even though I have an ebook for it, I'm going to keep this physical copy because I have a memory associated to it. And I think that is at the heart of a lot of people's love for books, is some sort of memory. I know a lot of people that keep books from when they were a kid. Even though they're now 60, 70, 80 years old, they still have these books from when they were young, because of the memories associated with the object. It's not even so much the story, I think. I mean, the story is what I think fleshes out that memory, but it's really about the object. It's this idea that, like, that book was there with me at that time. And there's something about the temporality and the abstraction of digital text, I think, that doesn't have that ability to confer an attachment of memory to the object. I'm not going to have any attachment to my Kobo e-reader, but I might have an attachment to a physical book. And it's what it represents, right? Like my ebook can be all things. It's any of those books at any time. But this is only ever this book. This is only ever Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. It is immutable insofar as it's destructible, which is another thing against it, versus an e-reader. I mean, yes, an e-reader can break, but it's much more durable. But this is immutable. It will always be this story, or it will be nothing at all. And I think for whatever reason, that's like really enticing, or that's really beautiful, maybe even. I don't know. I think there's so many positive factors and things that an e-reader has over a physical book. But I don't know. I feel like there's something inside of us where we won't ever fully adopt it. That's not true. I think we'll fully adopt it at some point. Probably because we'll have to at some point. I imagine if things in the world get worse, which they tend to e-readers might have to be the way, just with the economy of them. That's the other thing. I mean, ebooks are just way less expensive, by and large. You can often get ebooks for $2 if you wait for sales. And a lot of classic works of literature are $1 to $2, if not free. A lot of ebooks are free. So do you want to buy the Penguin edition that has the cool introduction and maybe the footnotes? Yeah, maybe. But also you could just get a free copy online without doing anything nefarious. So I suppose this is veering into like an e-reader versus physical, digital print thing. That's not really what I'm going for. It just comes out of me when I think about this because I'm a person who has sort of adopted digital reading. And I came from the perspective of not thinking I would be into that, of having these kind of romanticized, idealized notions about books and print media. But anymore, the more I've read with an e-reader, the less I feel those things. So I think it's about having a center of memory, right? Something to attach a memory to that's hard and I can feel it. I think there's a lot to be said about tactility. Like, these are tactile things. We love to feel things and engage that sense. When I'm feeling my e-reader, it's just a block of plastic and a screen. But when I'm feeling this, it's a page that has a certain texture. It's pages that have a certain texture. Of course, people will go on and on ad nauseum, annoyingly, about the smell of a book, which I'm not immune to, but people talk about it way too much. And you can feel, I was actually, so being spurred on by this and actually some other videos I was watching last night, I came across, I was like, okay, what's the science on this? Because I was watching a video where they said, like, we don't really have much science on this. So I was like, okay, what's the current science? And I found one study that compared individuals, I think 24-year-olds, or 24 18-year-olds, I think is what it was, maybe. And I think half of them read the same story. It was like an hour-long mystery story on a Kindle, and then the other half read it in print. And I just read the abstract. I didn't read the methodology and all that, so this is with a grain of salt. But it said that by most markers, it's an identical process. But the one area where print media seemed to have a leg up was in chronology. The ability of these individuals who had undergone the study to remember the order of events. And it seems, I'm drawing my own conclusion here. I bet a part of that is when you're reading a book, there's a constant reminder of where you're at in that book via the weight in your hand and like your visualization of, right, how much you've read versus how much is left. And so I think your mind might be imprinting that and recognizing that you have only so much left, or you're at about this, stage in the book. And so your mind can categorize that and tie that to a tactile element. Whereas with an e-reader, it's just every page is whatever. And yes, you can have a progress bar and things like that, but I think it's a slightly different pathway in the mind. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, I keep going down this rabbit hole. I'm going to have to title this video, What is it about books? Parentheses, and we go way off the rails because I ended up getting onto this topic. But I think it's enjoyable to think about and hopefully enjoyable to listen to. But yeah, what is it about books? I think it's a sense of memory, a sense of immutability, right? Something that is what it is. It's reliable in a way. It can't change. Something to anchor ourselves to. I also think there's a non-insignificant element of people like to posture, and this is not unique to books, but how many people are buying books and not reading them just to have them? People love objects and things. We like amassing material. It's almost like it's hard-coded into our DNA. And so I think what it is about books is that they are something to possess. There's something to have and to hold and to show off to people, right? I think I'm one of the few channels, granted I don't have a following hardly at all, but I don't, there's no books behind me. And partly that was intentional. I wanted to be a little bit different. And I think if I ever do get a better setup, which I hope I do, I'm not going to have books on, I'm not going to be in front of a bookshelf. Because I like the aesthetic of like, first of all, I'm not a channel that's just about books, but even if I was, like, I love the idea of like, I don't have to shout that at you. My words are going to be what tells you that. What I say, how I talk about things, how I speak on certain topics will tell you that I'm a reader. And of course, I've been on record saying I'm not much of a reader and I'm growing into one. So it also is related to that. But I think that's another thing about books is people like saying something about themselves. And a bookshelf is a declaration. It might be a phony one, but it's a declaration that I care about things like books. And that makes me a certain type of person. And that means you should treat me as that certain type of person and talk to me as that certain type of person. And I should act like a certain type of person. And it's not always phony. I'm not saying that for sure. But I think a lot of times it is. And so I think that's another thing about books is there's something to possess and something that you can have around that says something about you, whether that's true or not. And I think finally, maybe it's the history. Especially if you find an old copy of a book. And this kind of ties to memory, but even further than your own personal biography. Right? Maybe you find a book that was from the late 1700s. It's a first printing of this, random book. You might not care at all about the contents of that book, but the fact that you have it in your hands, that's a piece of history. That's been places. And it almost imbues the text with something further as well. Now it's not just, a copy of, I don't know, an early copy of Moby Dick. Now it's not just that. It imbues the text itself with maybe to a person a greater sense of meaning or place or significance. So I don't know. It's such an interesting thing. Because the reality is, I think we are headed for a world where print media is waning. I mean, physical media in general. I mean, digital media has taken a big part of that pie. But then again, I think about like certain data saying that, like, I mean, especially ebook sales are not lucrative. I mean, most people still love print media. But it depends on the sector, right? When you talk about books, yes, a lot of people still love physical books, but then you talk about magazines or things like that, and people are not really subscribing to magazines like they once were. But, granted, there's also a lot of other factors in there, like the quality of the writing they're in, and people just generally getting that media elsewhere. But I don't know. What is it about books? Maybe I'll tag a few people in this. Probably not. I'm not much of a tagger. And also I'm not even that familiar with a lot of BookTube anyway. I mean, I know of several, but not anyone sort of on my subscriber level. But yeah, clearly I'm not immune. Like I said, I mean, I'm going to keep this around, even if I never read it again, because it holds a memory. Like, this is the thing. that I held during that time. And so maybe it's me trying to connect with the past self, trying to be someone who I'm not anymore. Even a year ago, let alone a book I would have kept from childhood or a book from when I was in middle school. You know, maybe I would have kept a, copy of Frendel or something, or, I don't know, The Soldier's Heart by Gary Paulson. I loved that book when I was in elementary school. If I found a copy of that, I'd probably be more likely to pick it up because of that memory that I have attached to it, let alone if I had a copy still of my copy of that book that I read when I was that age. And so maybe it's some sort of attempt to reconnect to a past self. I don't know. There's no real answer. We all have our different desires and proclivities and things that are important to us. But for me, I'll hold on to a few memories here and there, and I'll buy, books that I can't find anywhere else digitally. But other than that, I'm pretty much in the digital realm. And I think hopefully, while there can be drawbacks, I'm sure, to digital reading, hopefully that can just make the text really stand on its own. Not to say that you should remove the aesthetic value of a book, but maybe there's something to be said about when that aesthetic value is no longer there. Now you're just with the text. You're just with the ideas and what it says. You're not competing with affections for other things, for other physical aspects of that text. It's just the text, and you're just contending with the ideas therein. And maybe there's something beautiful about that too. So yeah, there's my ramblings. But, what do you think? What is it about books? Why do they matter? What is it about print books? What is it about books? Let me know.